And we're back. Everybody's hurt. This just sucks. Anyway, okay, wait, that's not. What is this? This is Inside Black and Gold. I'm Jeff Nowak. We are coming at you with a quick episode to get you ready for week 4, at least from an injury perspective, and kind of a look at how the Saints might handle this Erik McCoy, Cesar Ruiz, whatever else you want to throw in there, how they're going to shake things up on the offensive line this week to try to survive the loss of the Pro Bowl center. So we'll dive into the injury report. We'll talk about some expectations for how the Saints might shift their offensive line around, a couple more key injuries that we will discuss. We'll also have an interview with Charles McDonald, NFL writer for Yahoo Sports. Got into a lot of subjects about the NFC South, the Saints, the NFL at large, some quarterbacks that we've seen, some struggles of which teams are legit, which 3-0 teams are pretenders, that sort of thing. We'll talk about a lot of that. It was recorded prior to this segment, so I know what we're going to talk about. It was a lot of fun. I hope you enjoy it. Either way, we'll get into that in the second segment. Final segment, I want to hear from Clancy Barone. I want to talk about the tight ends and why things might not necessarily get better from that position anytime soon, right? Because it's pretty apparent what's been going on with that group. And hopefully with some health, they can be a little more productive. But we'll hear from Clancy Barone. We'll talk about that, a few more topics as we get in here. But first things first, let us dive into the ever-expanding injury report for the Saints. And actually, I take that back. It's a little shorter this week in terms of the overall names on it, but it is not better for the Saints. And so we'll start at the top. We'll start with the full participants, and we'll start with the good news, right? Derek Carr dealing with a left groin issue, but a full participant. It almost feels like the Saints are trolling the NFL after Derek Carr got a $14,000 fine for a groin issue, right? It was an issue with his groin that the NFL took offense to. Anyway, let's move on from there. It doesn't seem like it's going to be something that limits him. Now, if he is a little less mobile because of that, that could be a factor, because this is going to be a week where you might need to run around a little bit. You might need to get a little more creative with how you move him around in terms of the protection, but we'll see either way. Full participant, not something that we expect to impact him in terms of availability. So moving forward, the other player listed on this injury report that was a full participant is Taysom Hill, chest issue, but looks like he's going to be back this week. Dennis Allen said he expects him to be out there, and that obviously makes things a lot easier for the Saints in terms of the run game, right? Like if you're talking about 3rd and 1, 4th and 1, I need to get a yard. Who am I giving the ball to? I'm giving it to Taysom Hill. In that last game, Saints got in that situation. They couldn't pick up a yard. They didn't have Taysom Hill. Didn't work out. So we'll see, but that's a good sign. Now, 3 limited participants. DeMarco Jackson, calf issue. Colin Saunders, calf issue. Landon Young, foot issue. All 3 of those guys, you feel like they're on the right track. Colin Saunders got back to practice for the first time, at least officially for the first time since that calf issue. So I think he adds a bit. One of the things that was frustrating in that game against the Eagles where you weren't able to stop the run. You really weren't. And I think part of that is, hey, the defensive interior just didn't get the job done. You talk about Brian Brzee, and I think there's been a lot of positive things to say about Brian Brzee. You go back and watch that tape. He did not handle the run well, and that's been something that he has taken a little bit longer to pick up on. I'd like to see him continue to improve, but on obvious rundowns, I think Colin Saunders is still your guy. So we'll see if he can get back and have a bit of an impact in a game that you really got to stop the run again. And it should be a little bit easier against against Kirk Cousins than it was against Jalen Hurts, who obviously adds another element in being able to run the ball himself. So we'll talk about that a little bit more as the week goes on, but I expect all 3 of those guys to potentially be available. But now let's dive into the bad stuff. Erik McCoy heads to IR. He had surgery today. It sounds like it's a groin issue, a sports hernia maybe. You're talking probably 6 to 8 weeks before he can get back. That is an estimation. But if it's true, if you're talking about 7 weeks that he misses, you're looking at sometime in mid-November. So that's more than enough time for this season to go off the rails. That cannot be, hey, we're going to figure it out until he gets back. It's got to be, hey, we got to win games while he is out. And some weeks are going to be more difficult than others. I think this is a game you really have to win. Especially when you consider, hey, look at the other side. Drew Dahlman is on IR, the Falcons center. So they're going to have issues with that as well. Caleb McGarry, who's listed on this injury report, was a DMP. He's a tackle. So he's probably not going to be out there. So the Saints and Falcons are in the same boat in terms of, man, we can't pass protect the way we want to. And I think that's a bigger issue for the Falcons and a guy who cannot move in Kirk Cousins. So we'll talk about that. But the other guys, Alontae Taylor dealing with an illness, I don't think that's anything to be super concerned about. Cesar Ruiz, however, dealing with a knee issue, that is something to be concerned about. And when Mickey Loomis went on WWL yesterday, Tuesday, he talked about how Cesar went into that game or was in that game dealing with a couple things. And I was unaware of that. He didn't end up on the injury report going into that game. So either it happened early in the game or whatever, but he's not listed with an ankle injury. And the ankle injury is the one we knew about because he came off the field, went to the injury tent, came back in. So this knee issue is clearly something that affected him. And you have to wonder, because he did not look good in that game. He struggled in that game. Jalen Carter, he just got whipped over and over again. And if you're dealing with a knee issue, that might help explain some of the struggles. Now, it's not like, obviously, if you're going to play, you got to be better. But it does make me wonder, okay, how much was that knee issue affecting him? And is he at a point, is he at a level that he can play? When you watch, Jalen Carter was whipping him. I mean, like, I think part of that was Jalen Carter had a really good game. I think part of that was Cesar was struggling, was on the struggle bus. So we'll have to see how that goes. But man, if Cesar Ruiz misses this game, that will mean you go into week 4 of the NFL season, of the 2024 NFL season, with all 5 of your offensive line starters being different from a year ago. That's not true. I take that back. It will be all 5 of your offensive line starters are different from week 18 of last year. Technically, if we're going to split hairs, week 4, the Saints hosted the Bucs and Trevor Penning was your starting left tackle. So he was there. Now he's playing right tackle. He got benched a couple weeks later, but I guess from a technicality standpoint, there is one player from week 4 of last year. But either way, you get the idea. That will be a pretty drastic shift from what you had a year ago. And it's not a good change, and when we get to the end of this list, we'll go through, okay, what do I think the offensive line makeup's going to be? But the other 2 injuries are just as concerning. Demario Davis dealing with a hamstring issue. We did see him out at practice. He did not participate, but being involved, that's a good sign. Alvin Kamara dealing with hip issue, rib issue. It's most likely stemming from that hit he took on the Saints touchdown drive. I think it was a 7 or 8 yard run, took a big hit at the end of it, came off in some clear discomfort, never went into the injury tent, missed one play. Jamal Williams got his 1 carry of the game, lost a yard. Alvin Kamara came back on the field, and that was the play that Derek Carr found Chris Olave for the touchdown. Now, not at practice today. Hopefully that's not something that keeps him out, but a running back dealing with a rib issue, where do running backs get hit? A receiver, you can protect that a little bit more, right? A quarterback, you can protect that a little bit more. Running backs, you don't really have a choice. You're getting hit. Often you're getting hit in the midsection. That's how you're getting tackled. So, you might be able to put on a flak jacket. Maybe it's a pain tolerance issue, but that's concerning to me. And we'll have to see just how significant it is. Maybe Alvin can get on the field and practice. I don't know where you look at running back if Alvin can't go. Right? Like Demario Davis dealt with a hamstring injury in camp. You got to see Anthony Orji, you got to see DeMarco Jackson, you got to see Willie Gay getting a good bit of run at the middle linebacker position, and so if he does miss any time, that would be his first ever Saints game missed with an injury. The only other game he missed was due to COVID. But at least you have an idea of what to expect from those guys. If Alvin's not out there, Jamal, I mean, I'm hopeful that Jamal can get something done, but what has he shown to this point that makes you feel like he can be the featured back? I don't know. Kendre Miller still 1 week away from coming back from IR if he's ready to. I don't even know if he will be at that point, but he is definitely not going to be available for this game. So you're talking Jordan Mims, Jacob Kabodi. Not exactly, when you talk about, okay, what makes this offense go? What is the engine of this offense? It's Alvin Kamara. And if he can't be out there, that's a problem. So we'll have to wait and see on that. But let's deal with the most immediate issue. And let's first hear from Dennis Allen. He talked today about the injuries and kind of his approach when you're dealing with this many key players with question marks. This is what he had to say.
Well, look, we're going to have some other guys step up. That happens in our league. I mean, I'm looking at, if you just pay attention to the league in general, like there was, I don't know, a dozen or more offensive linemen that went down, this week. So it's, everybody's dealing with it. And look, Atlanta's dealing with it. I know they lost their starting center, and I don't think anybody really knows yet for sure. At least we don't know for sure whether or not McGarry's fine or not. We'll figure that out probably come game time. So everybody's got to be able to adjust and make changes, and we'll do that.
You mentioned it was a couple weeks ago about taking some things off of Derek Carr's plate in terms of checks, the line of scrimmage, and things like that. How big of a role did Erik McCoy play in that, and does that complicate the replacement?
Well, look, I mean, obviously Erik was instrumental in the communication with everything that we're doing up front, and so, yeah, anytime you lose a guy like that is that smart, does such a great job of communicating, and is a good player to go along with that, it makes it tough. But we've got guys that we believe in that'll go in and step in and play well in his absence.
All right. And yeah, I mean, you got to make it work, right? Every team is dealing with injuries. I made the comment earlier this week that it seemed like every third tweet I came across was one guy or another landing on IR or about to land on IR or was already put on IR or is done for the year, blah, blah, blah. It happens. It's the NFL. No one's going to sit there and feel bad for you because guys can't play. But what exactly do you do to fix those issues? And so on the offensive line, I've been trying to kind of come to terms with, okay, how are you going to manage this? Where are you going to shift some guys around? The Saints signed Shane Lemieux to the active roster. They also signed Chris Reed, who is a 9-year veteran. He's appeared in 70 NFL games, can play guard and center. They signed him to the practice squad, so he's a guy I don't expect him to play, but he will be a factor in terms of how you replace some people. But I kind of look at it and I say, hey, what do you do at center? That's the first question. What do you do at center? Well, your options are move Lucas Patrick over from left guard, move Cesar Ruiz over from right guard, or put Shane Lemieux at center. And I've kind of vacillated on this. I kind of felt like, hey, if you had Lucas Patrick there to begin with, it's because you feel like he's the best option. But I also think that's part of, hey, there's a 53-man roster limit, so are you better off keeping him at left guard? Like, where do you sacrifice the most? Because I think Lucas has played pretty well when you put him at left guard. I don't think he's played particularly well when you put him at center. So I'm kind of coming to terms with the idea that, okay, the best course scenario would be, the best course you could take would be keep Lucas at left guard, kind of maintain that continuity with him and Taliesin Fuaga on the left side. So you at least have two positions that are not changing. Obviously keeping Trevor Penning at right tackle. You have Landon Young as the possible starter at left guard, at right guard if Cesar Ruiz can't go, because that's kind of been what you've been looking at, and I think he probably is your best option. And I think, drum roll, you don't need a drum roll, I think it's going to be Shane Lemieux starting at center. And there's a few reasons you could go with that. And now it's a little concerning. Obviously, we watched him play at center against the 49ers, and that did not go well. I think the biggest issues were, can he snap the ball? Because that was what you saw. Like, there was a couple snaps in that game, basically rolled it to Spencer Rattler. But I don't think snapping a ball is something that you look at and say you can't get better at. You can't work at it and improve. I heard him talking today, like, when he was with the Giants every year, they would tell him, hey, we think you should play center. We think you can play center. Now, here's the thing. Shane Lemieux has never taken a snap at center in an NFL game. So you're going out on a limb here. You're taking a leap of faith that he's going to look good when you do it. But I think there's some competitive advantages you can have with that in, okay, if I'm the Falcons and I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to attack this offensive line, I'm going to go watch that Eagles tape and I'm going to look at all the things that Lucas Patrick maybe struggled with, how he got beat, and I'm going to spam that button. I'm going to do that over and over again. If they spend all of this week trying to figure out how to beat Lucas Patrick, and then you throw Shane Lemieux at him, and they're not exactly sure what he does well and what he doesn't do well, maybe that's an advantage for the Saints. Now, you are going to be at an inherent disadvantage by going with a backup center to begin with. So I'm not saying that having Shane Lemieux in that role is going to be an advantage for you, but it is at least going to be a curveball that you can throw at the Falcons in a week where they've got a lot to prepare for, right? They're not sitting there, just twiddling their thumbs saying, hey, we can do whatever we want. They've got issues too. And I think that will allow you to say, hey, if we put Shane Lemieux there and Cesar plays, then the only thing that's changing is the center. And everyone else feels like they're at least in their natural position, their most comfortable position, the position they've been working at. And I think that probably gives you a better chance to succeed than trying to change your center and left guard, trying to change your center and right guard. And hopefully with a week of practice, they can do that. But and at the same time, Shane Lemieux's been there. He's been working. I'd rather give him a chance. I know a lot of people are like, hey, sign this guy, sign this guy, sign this guy. If there's someone sitting there on their couch not playing right now, it's probably for a reason, right? And, I've seen Mason Cole's name thrown around. I've seen a lot of things. But at the end of the day, Shane Lemieux's on the practice squad because the team likes him. The team has been working with him. He understands the offense. So he's going to get the first shot at that role, or at least at that kind of extra eighth offensive line role. Now, you could still go Lucas Patrick. If you spend all week looking at Shane in practice and he just doesn't seem like he can get the job done, then you say, hey, we're gonna go with Lucas on game day and have Shane be the backup. That's an option too. But right now, as I look at it, that's my offensive line setup is Shane at center, Lucas Patrick left guard, Cesar Ruiz or Landon Young at right guard, and Trevor Penning right tackle, Calais Sifuaga left tackle. Nick Saldiveri, it's confusing. I don't know why they're so hesitant to put Nick Saldiveri in. I do kind of feel like there's a scenario that you could look at and say, do I want to have Nick Saldiveri make his NFL starting debut next to a rookie left tackle and next to a backup center? And is that your best option? And I don't know. But we'll have to see. Either way, that's the injury report. Hopefully, Demario Davis can get out there. That's the one I feel like, hey, this could go either way. Alvin, he's going to try. I assure you, Alvin's going to try. And it's not, unless he's dealing with a cracked rib or something significant like that, then you have to see. But I think if that was the case, you probably would have seen the Saints bring in an extra back off the free agent wire. So do with that information what you will. But okay, this is Inside Black and Gold. We broke down the injury report. We're going to talk more about Falcons. Saints are going to come at you in the second segment with an interview with Charles McDonald, NFL writer. Great work that he does over at Yahoo Sports. Also hosts a podcast called Football 301. So a lot of great insights. So stick around for that. And then the final segment, we're going to hear from Saints tight ends coach Clancy Barone, talk a little more about Juwan Johnson and the tight end position. Then we're going to get the heck out of here, and we're going to see how the rest of this week develops. But all right, I'm Jeff Nowak. This is Inside Black and Gold. Who dat? Stick around. And we're back on Inside Black and Gold. I am Jeff Nowak. In this segment, got kind of a special interview here. We're going to have Charles McDonald, NFL writer for Yahoo Sports, coming in, talk about the NFL at large, talk about the NFC South, what he's seen from Saints, Falcons, Panthers, Bucks so far. We're going to hit on some hot takes, some cold takes, some players that have struggled, what we think about the first 3 weeks of the NFL season. Good stuff. So without further ado, let's hit that interview now. All right, coming back in here, I am Jeff Nowak alongside Charles McDonald, NFL writer for Yahoo Sports, co-host of a podcast, Football 301 with Matt Harmon and Nate Tice. Fun fact, whenever I refer to Matt Harmon, which I've had to a few times because he's come up with a few of his podcasts, I always have to battle against my own instinct to call him Mark Harmon.
Mark Harmon?
No, that's the guy from NCIS, which throughout the process, I figured out that Mark Harmon used to be a pretty good football player in his own right. So it's not completely unrelated, but I know that's probably not how you expect it to be introduced in this podcast, but it is information. So if you want to share that and let him know, that he is Mark Harmon in my head, even though it's wrong. That's where it is. But how you doing? Thanks for coming on, man.
I'm doing good. I was about to say I'm familiar with some Mark Harmon lore because my mom is a big fan of all of those cop shows: Law and Order, NCIS, Criminal Minds, like you name it. She knows all the characters and has watched a good amount of episodes. So I understood the reference.
There's something special about those police procedurals. You can be on a boat, you can be in Chicago, you could be in a fire department, doesn't matter. But here we are looking to talk about the NFL and, in particular, the Saints, the NFC South. I think a good jumping off point here. We're 3 weeks into the season. The Saints, I think they were a kind of a fun little punching bag for everyone in the offseason. And I feel like DA, Dennis Allen, Derek Carr, they just have that something about them where it's just easy to clown on them when things aren't going well. They started as hot as anybody, kind of fell to earth in week 3. What is your perception of the Saints through the first 3 weeks of the season?
It's interesting because obviously it was kind of like it was two separate processes, right? Because you watch it or you see what's happening live, right? And you see, whoa, 45 points back-to-back weeks. It's one of the craziest starts we've ever seen an offense get off to. And when you start watching just those 2 games, you start watching the tape, and to me, it was like they aren't really reinventing things pass game wise. Like it's a lot of classic forgetting cover 3 single high. Like if you play Madden, like we're running crosses, right? We're just trying to get guys open for chunk plays down the field. But the run game to me, I thought was just exceptional, right? Where I actually wrote like before they played the game against the Eagles this past weekend, I wrote somewhere that their offensive line was like the real weapon of this offense because they allow you to stay in like positive run scripts where you can run the ball or just allow you to like make everything look the same when you're doing play action stuff because, McCoy is so good, Ruiz is so good. Fuaga has been a big surprise, I think, at left tackle, especially in the run game. So like we know of any Shanahan style offense, like the run game is going to be the basis of it. And then you build on the pass game on the back end. I think this past week you saw just how important the offensive line is for them, especially when you're going against someone like Jalen Carter, who has been on an absolute tear to start the season, just been crushing every offensive line he's played against. So when you start getting backups in this situation, I understand why they struggled. To me, it was kind of like the same thing you see sometimes the 49ers go through, or you'll see some of these other teams that run like Shanahan stuff where when the game gets tight and like maybe you can't just run the ball like you want to, the drop back game is still something that needs to be figured out. Like if you're not going to be able to use play action a bunch. So I don't think like it was anything to worry about too much because like you showed you're capable of scoring all those points, but you're going to need some little tweaks that really everyone who runs a solid offense runs into at some point.
Yeah, and the Erik McCoy's headed to IR. Cesar Ruiz is hurt. It's because I agree with you. That was to me the biggest surprise for this team was, wow, this looks like a functional offensive line and a group that you can kind of get behind and figure it out. And obviously, they faced the Cowboys, a team that I figured was going to run roughshod over that offensive line, and instead they found a way to kind of scheme around it. I think the best way I heard it put was like John Benton and Clint Kubiak kind of threw like a curtain over it and pulled it back. And I was like, wow, where did all the problems go? And, I think that's why, without Ruiz and without McCoy, if they can't play this week, obviously McCoy's not going to play. I feel like they're, to an extent, you give a team a week to plan for something like not having your starting Pro Bowl center, and it's going to look a lot different. But kind of just stepping back from that, because the Saints are going against the Falcons this week. They also don't have their starting center. These guys went on IR this week, so we know they're going to be gone for at least a month. And I'm kind of just curious, as you've watched the NFC South in general, is what we've seen over the first month of the season, do you think it's legitimate and maybe, okay, this division might be a lot tougher than it was originally thought? Or is that an overreaction and things are going to start to come back down to earth like we saw with the Eagles beating up on the Saints a little bit? Obviously, it was a close game, but the Eagles dominated that game in general. The Broncos beating up on the Bucs. Obviously, the Falcons lost as well. Tough game against the Chiefs. Where do you kind of stand on the NFC South compared to some of the other divisions?
I think it's tough. And look, I'm a Falcons fan. It's been just struggling through all of that for the past, like basically damn near a decade at this point, just struggling through how tough and brutal that can be. But I will say, I think this past week, like the Bucs and the Saints coming back down to earth kind of goes hand in hand with your point of like, is this a more competitive division? Because obviously, the Saints, no offense in the NFL history has ever scored 45 points a game, right? It's like you're going to come back down at some point, and you should still hope you can be at least a top 3 to top 5 offense for the rest of the way based on what you showed the first 2 weeks, because the potential is there, especially if the offensive line can get healthy. The Panthers showed way different team with Andy Dalton. I don't think they're like a 40-point scoring team with Andy Dalton, but like you can be functional potentially with Andy Dalton. And I think we got to see some of the things that they paid for this offseason. The guards, the wide receivers start to come to fruition a little bit in that random blowout win that they had against the Raiders this past weekend. The Bucks, they're kind of in a weird space. I think people have kind of started to figure out the defense. Alontae Davis is kind of over the hill. I think they need to retool the back step a little bit. But even then, like they have the framework of like, let's call it like an 8 to 10 win team where they're still going to be a tough out most weeks. And then the Falcons, who like I really wasn't that high on coming into the season. I thought they bungled the entire offseason. Like getting Kirk was good or getting Penix was fine, but like doing both in the same offseason was a little bit weird. And They were thin going into the season on defense, which is why they had to go out and get Judon and Simmons. But Justin Simmons has been a great addition to the secondary. They play teams a lot tougher, like the Eagles and the Chiefs. I thought they were kind of get smacked by both teams, but they were a lot tougher in those games than I foresaw. So I think like the NFC South, I don't know if it's like a great division now, but they are more competitive as a whole, especially like if the Falcons defense is going to be as solid as they've been so far, and Andy Dalton can at least make the Panthers look functional,
Yeah, I think functional is a funny word there because, like, if you're a top pick and you're kind of struggling a little bit, seeing Andy Dalton come to town, or any quarterback who doesn't feel like super secure in their job, watching Andy Dalton walk in the door, I think I saw some tweet. It was like he should go to the Bears next week, and so he'd be like a bar rescue for struggling quarterbacks. But no, that's I feel bad for Bryce. Like, I do too. Like, that guy is in. Oh man, like you talk about ruining a guy's mental state at the quarterback position. Not only did you throw him into the fire, didn't really give him a chance with the pieces around him, then not only do you replace him with Andy Dalton goes out there and it's like, this is why you suck. That's tough. I just, it's hard to see a road back from that.
There is a road back from that. I think this is it. I think this is, and it sucks to say because, you start going around for teams that maybe have a quarterback issue or want a quarterback of the future or are trying to figure out like that guy to develop. What have you really seen there that would say, I will not only trade an asset for that, but I will also risk my job security on this turning out to be something that is, viable at the NFL level, which I don't really know if that's a fair expectation to place upon him right now. I don't think it's fair for someone to get into that race and say, we're putting all this on Bryce. So I think you're probably just stuck there. Maybe they trade him after the season, but man, it was just so bad. And the fact that it flipped so quickly when they put Dalton in the lineup. And to be honest with you, this isn't the first time that Dalton has played well while Bryce has struggled, because it happened last year too. I think it's sad because, he was such a great college player. You have to trade up, how much this matters. And then it just,
Yeah, at this point, it feels like they would be lucky to get like the Trey Lance package for him, but that's a road they'll travel when they have to. And kind of speaking of that, okay, what's real, what's not? There's 5 unbeaten teams remaining, which feels like a low number. No division has 2 teams that are still unbeaten yet. You got the Seahawks, Vikings, Bills, Chiefs, and Steelers. Of that group, which team is like, if you had that meme where it's like, oh, you got two dragon heads and then the third one off to the side, it's kind of like the Giants were that team, I think, last year where they started, or maybe 2 years ago where they started 3-0 and it was like, these things are not the same. Which of those teams is the pretender?
Probably the Steelers, right? I mean, it sucks to say because they just win 9 to 10 games every year. And that's something like when I was younger, I'm like, oh, why not just bottom out and just suck and try and figure it out another way? But as I've gotten older, I've really appreciated the consistency in always just being playoff relevant. Never having a losing season in 17 years for Mike Tomlin? Like, that's pretty crazy. And they're on track to have another winning season. But then you watch the game, right? it was like, okay, they got the Falcons week 1, which was, Kirk was not healthy at all for that game. And they just kind of inched their way down the field on offense. Week 2, got the Broncos. That's a game that a defense like that should absolutely smash that Broncos offense, because the defense is legitimately good. And then last week again, like, you're playing another easy-ish team in the Chargers, where they are still rebuilding and they're still a ways away. So, on one hand, you can say they've gotten a pretty blessed start to the season, but also, like, they've won all 3 games. And the offense might not look pretty, but the defense is certainly good. And if they can just figure out a way to keep running the ball with Justin Fields and Najee Harris and Jalen Warren, keep developing the young offensive linemen, play good defense, I mean, they could go 9-8 and 10-7 again. They're always tough, even if they're not actually all that good,
Yeah, it's funny. I hear a lot of the same things about the Saints, like in the sense of, hey, this is a team that, while a lot of times people will look down on it, they haven't won fewer than 7 games since 2005, which is the year before Sean Payton got here, which is a really long time to not just kind of naturally bottom out like a lot of teams will, or a lot of teams allow themselves to, is probably a better way to put it. And I think there's value in that. But it is frustrating when it's like, you look at a team and you're like, man, I just don't see a Super Bowl here. Like, what's the ceiling of this team? And it just doesn't feel like, okay, yeah, maybe you could sneak into the playoffs, get there, but where's the upward trajectory? I don't know. But either way, there's still value in putting a competitive product on the field. And I think that's kind of what you see, no pun intended, with the Steelers and Justin out there.
It's good. It's good not to just be a loser and quit, like, just because I think the Mike Tomlin bit where he's saying that we do not care, I think that's absolutely true. Now, if I were him, I probably would have tried a little bit harder along this path to, like, maybe trade for like a Matthew Stafford if I could pull it off, or sign Kirk Cousins if we're in that ballpark. But they've I don't know how they do it, but they just do it every year. I remember when I was covering the Jets for the Daily News back in like 2019 and 2020. There was a game where like Duck Hodges came up to, like, Duck Hodges started 3-0 as the Steelers quarterback, and he was awful. But they still won like 8-9 games that year because, I don't know, maybe it's just magic, but gotta believe in it at some point.
No question. But all right, let's get into, I'm going to call it hot and cold, because I want to know, okay, hottest take, coldest take. Let's start with the hot take. 3 weeks into the season, what would you say is your hottest take about what you have seen thus far?
I think that Caleb Williams has been a lot better than people give him credit for. The whole, like, the stats are bad, and I think especially when you pair it with the expectations, right? He's like kind of in Trevor Lawrence land, where it's like, okay, we thought that you were just going to walk in and be like a top 15 quarterback as a rookie. Maybe that's not the case, but really that's got stuff to do with us, more so than Caleb or something like Trevor. But I think with Caleb, when you watch him, the offensive line is really bad. Awful. A lot worse than I think most people, including me, projected coming into the season. But what you're seeing, like, over the past 3 weeks is how much he's had to grown up in terms of like pocket management and being able to throw in the run, and being able to like find those holes like within the pocket so he can step up and make a play. The arm talent's still there. I think the accuracy has been better than the numbers would suggest. It's going to be a work in progress here. It hasn't been pretty, but I think if you go back and watch the Colts games and the Texans game, you'll find a lot more to like when you just go back and you just watch it without someone yapping in your ear about how terrible this is. If you can just kind of block out the noise, I think you'll find a lot to like about what Caleb Williams has done so far, even though like the actual results have been disastrous.
So your hot take is not that you would rather pick number 2 in the draft, because that's kind of what it feels like right now.
No,
that's a better spot to pick in if you're taking a quarterback.
Dude, honestly, I think with Bryce, like last year, that was just a flat out misevaluation by everyone.
I agree.
You just miss. I'm not willing to go there on Caleb yet, even though Jaden Daniels, that was a really good game on Monday night for him. And I think if you're a Commanders fan, you're like, woof, we at least have baseline stable quarterback play, which is a lot higher than we could say last year.
Yeah, how much of that do you think is just, hey, this is a very simple offense that people are not handling very well? Because that's like, when you look at the completion percentage, everyone's talking about the completion percentage. Like, yeah, the completion percentage is going to be high when you give them these easy reads and the defense is doing nothing. And I think that was a lot more about, and don't get me wrong, Jaden's been great, and I think he's a good quarterback. But man, the Bengals I feel like the Bengals are just really bad.
They are really bad. But, no one wants to have that. People will just get on you so hard when you say stuff like that. But, to be honest with you, I agree with everything you just said. Because this was the first game of the 3-game season where Jaden has actually pushed the ball down the field a little bit. Right. Because if you go back and you look at the first 2 games, he's about 5 air yards an attempt. So, you're literally just dinking and dunking and doing a lot of scrambling, which he still did on Monday night. But I thought what was good about Monday is at least you got to see them open up downfield. I think a lot of that has to do with the Bengals defense just being awful, because there's no reason why this Commanders offense should score nearly 40 points on you. That to me, that shows your defense is really bad. But, just to not rain on everyone's parade, I would say also, if you're the number 2 overall pick, what you should do is come out and play well against a defense like the Bengals and put up some numbers. Now, 21-23, that's pretty crazy. I don't think it's fair to expect that again, but you have to be at least pleased with what you've seen so far in 3 games. And if you're a Commanders fan, you're on the fast track to Rookie of the Year, which feels pretty good.
Yeah, no question. But all right, let's flip that. Let's talk about, okay, what is your coldest take? What is the thing that you came into this season thinking, got it, 100%, I know this to be true, and through 3 weeks, that has just been completely torn to shreds?
Dude, I thought this Colts offense was going to be a lot better than it was. Okay, I was all in. I'll give you 2. It was the Colts offense was going to be a lot better than they were, and I thought the Cowboys defense was also going to be a lot better than it was. I had kind of talked myself into, maybe this is just the old Falcons fans in me. You flipped off of Dan Quinn. You got Mike Zimmer. Week 1 looked good, and then everything since then has just been an abject disaster. And I think that for the Cowboys defense, I think I didn't properly rate how important, basically, and it sounds crazy to say, the middle of the field was for them sometimes, where if you go back and watch the Ravens game and watch the Packers games or other games where they lost late in the season, they can't stop the run against teams that really want to pound it. And the problem is, you've invested a first-round pick in Mozzie Smith, who has been just awful. And then you find yourself trading for, Jordan Phillips before the season starts, which goes to show they obviously think they have a huge problem on the interior of their defense, but it's kind of too late to fix it. So you're stuck with this for a year. They haven't been able to get leads, which is what this defense needs to be effective. So I don't know if it's going to be a long season, but it's a season where it's not getting off to what they started. And Anthony Richardson on the Colts side, I thought this was just going to be a little bit more cohesive. You still got the week 1 game, which I think was cool. It was good. You've got basically the full force of his athletic impact, but you're still waiting for the accuracy to come together, which is so frustrating because you'll see him throw the Alec Pierce route that he had game 1, where it's off his back foot, 65 yards in the air, under pressure, double coverage, and it's just perfect for a touchdown.
Perfect, right.
Right. And then if you go back, you watch this Colts-Bears game this last week, and there's a play where Josh Downs is literally wide open, 40 yards down the field. There is no one within 15 yards of him. The pocket's clean, and he just sails it you would have thought it's about to hit a fan in the head when you watched it live, because he just missed him so badly. Those are the plays that you kind of got to just live with. But I think you got to start seeing more top-tier accuracy from Anthony Richardson soon before people start getting a little concerned for real.
Yeah. I feel like Anthony, it's funny because it's oh man, well, I thought he was going to be better, but then it's this is the guy you drafted. This is exactly what the book was on Anthony. And he came in, and it's he's got a lot of work to do. He's very raw. He can make these insane throws, and he's got this insane talent profile that you're all right, we're going to live with it. But I think anyone, you saw him coming out of Florida, and then all of a sudden he's a number 4 pick, and
well, it's so weird watching him play because he will. I think he's actually really good in terms of just because you don't really see him too many times as much as other gunslingers throw dangerous passes. I think he reads the field well. The problem is he just misses. The Josh Downs throw. It was perfect read. You're hitting the back of your drop. There's someone wide open. You fling it, and it goes 20 yards out of bounds. That's what he needs to fix. Because I think even on some interceptions that he had against like the Texans. There was one where I think Petrie picked it off in the back end, and like he's reading it outright. He throws it to the right receiver, but he just airmails it over the top and it gets picked off. And I'm like, dude, that's something you have to work on before they start taking the ball out of your hand and make you, like Tim Tebow, basically.
Yeah, I kind of look at him more like a Josh Allen. Like, I feel like people forget that early in Josh Allen's career, like he could always run. He has a cannon. He's always had a cannon, but I can't remember who it was. But there was one play, it was either his first or second year. He's just throwing it on an out and it's like 10 yards over the guy's head. And the guy just turns around like, what was that? That's not how I feel about Anthony Richardson right now. It's like, you'll see a play and you'll be like future Hall of Famer. Then you'll see a play and be like, what is he doing? Yeah. But no, I do think this time of year is really always fun because it's like prime overreaction season. After week 1, you watch the Cowboys play the Browns and you're like, wow, the Cowboys dominated. The Cowboys are really good because I came into the season thinking the Browns were pretty good. And then you go forward and you're like, wow, the Browns are actually pretty bad.
Right.
And then you're like, and then you watch the Saints go beat up on the Cowboys and you're like, man, I thought the Saints were going to be bad, but now they must be really, really good because the Cowboys beat a team that I thought was good. So that means they're pretty good. And then you're like, wow, the Saints must be a Super Bowl team. And then you watch the Cowboys go out and do the same thing again against the Ravens. You're like, wow, okay, wait, the Cowboys are bad. The Browns are worse. And then where are the Saints? I don't know. But I just find it really funny. It's like so hard to get your bearings at any point in the first half of the NFL season.
I had the same exact like thing with the Dolphins and the Jaguars, like that week 1 Dolphins Jaguars game. I couldn't really figure out because I thought I was like, whoa, Jaguars defense, you just shut down the Dolphins offense. Like that's a pretty good outside of like two chunk plays, which are just going to happen when you got Waddle and Tyreek out there. You did a good job of just shutting them down. Then you go to Cleveland next week. Defensive battle to me at the time, like these are 2 of the best defenses in the league. So they really go either way. Then they get to Buffalo, right? And they get smashed. And then you start thinking it back. Well, what happened in the Dolphins game? Well, even before 2 got hurt in the Bills game, the Dolphins still did not really move the ball or score points. So maybe the Dolphins offense isn't that good. And then maybe the Jaguars defense is overrated. And now I know they're overrated because they gave up 5 touchdowns in the first half on Monday night.
Yeah, that's kind of funny that you went to the Jaguars because that was my next question. And I have to imagine the Jaguars are the answer to this. Which head coach, this will be the last one, and I'll let you go. Which head coach is on the hottest seat right now? Because it's hard to look past what I saw on Monday night with the Jaguars.
It's Doug Peterson for sure, like without a doubt. I don't even know if there's a coach that maybe Zach Taylor, that's probably one, but I don't think anyone's as hot to see as Doug Peterson because it's not just like you're 0-3 and they came out and Shad Khan made a video before the season and said this was going to be the best Jaguars team ever. Is you look lifeless in these games. You look just no one cares. There's no energy. It seems like even in the midst of Trevor Lawrence struggling, he's the only one like trying to get people going like, hey, we are playing for our careers and our legacy and our dreams here. They just seem to check out of these games so fast. And like even the second half of the game against the Dolphins where they were up like 10-0 or 17-0 going into halftime. And they just came out and they had one drive where they got more than like 6 yards and they fumbled on that drive in the second half. So like I'm just confused. Like Doug, he's fought back against the idea of calling plays like for 2 years now. He just wants to like give it all to Press Taylor. Like he doesn't seem like he wants to really coach Trevor Lawrence anymore. And now it feels like we're getting back to the same way that it ended in Philly, where Doug's like, kind of starting to check out. And I'm done, which is, hey, I mean, I get it from like a me normal guy standpoint. Yeah, I would love to get fired to still have millions of dollars owed to me. But from like a team perspective and just getting things together, it's like, it's embarrassing. And you have to just imagine that if you can't get up for like 0-2 and our season's about to end and we're on the road on national TV at the Bills, if you can't get up for that, I just have to imagine the rest of it's going to be a horrendous season for Jacksonville.
I think there's a chance Trevor Lawrence goes down as the only quarterback in NFL history to sign a $50 million annual contract in the midst of 8 consecutive losses. Always good stuff. But I appreciate it. Charles McDonald, NFL writer for Yahoo Sports. Check out his podcast, Football 301, hosted with Matt Harmon and Nate Tice. Great stuff. Appreciate you being on here, man.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks again to Charles McDonald for coming on. Great stuff. As always, greatly appreciate the time and interesting. He's a Falcons fan, so he's got some skin in the game here. We'll see how it goes. I think the Saints, I have a good feeling about the Saints this week, but we'll find out. If the Saints beat up on the Falcons, we'll get right back to Charles and see how he feels about it. But without further ado, let's hit the break. We're going to come back. I want to get you more on a few subjects. I want to listen to Clancy Barone, Saints tight ends coach. He was on WWL this week, had some interesting information on Juwan Johnson, the tight ends, how things have gone there. And we'll hit a few more subjects on the way out the door. Again, I'm Jeff Nowak. This is Inside Black and Gold. Stick around. And we're back on Inside Black and Gold. I am Jeff Nowak. One more quick segment to throw at you here. And we're going to talk about the tight end position. I also want to hear from Mickey Loomis, who was on with Mike Haas last night. Some good content there to dive. He had some interesting things to say about fourth downs, analytics. I want to talk about that stuff. But first things first, I want to dive into the tight end position. I want to talk about Juwan Johnson, Foster Moreau, Dallin Holker, and we were able to get Clancy Barone on WWL last week. I thought he had some good insight on the tight end position. And, it's a guy who's been around forever. This is a guy who's coached multiple Pro Bowl tight ends. You're talking Algie Crumpler, talking Antonio Gates, talking all these guys, Julius Thomas with the Broncos, right? In those Peyton Manning years. But, he was asked about, okay, why is Juwan Johnson not as involved in this offense as we probably want him to be at this point? And I thought he had some interesting answers. And so let's hear from him on a couple of those subjects.
But Juwan Johnson, he's a big target. Why wasn't Juwan more involved? Considering that, wide receiver who's come play the tight end position, and you might ask him at times, his blocking needs to improve on that. But explain to the fans why he's not more involved in the passing game.
Well, there's a lot of things that kind of go into that equation. One is Juwan is coming off of off-season foot surgery, which we had no idea, and he didn't even know that he even had anything wrong with his foot. It was kind of bugging him a little bit during OTAs and during the vet minicamp. And when we broke vet minicamp, he goes and has an X-ray and realizes that he has to have surgery. So he spends his entire vacation, if you will, the latter part of June, all of July, and all of training camp trying to rehab that foot just so he can get back on the field. And he to his credit, he rushed it and did everything he could. He never even put on a helmet until the Wednesday before the opening game of the season. And so, there was a guy that hadn't had a whole lot of time on task. And so to ask him to jump in there and get, 45, 50 snaps a game, that would have been very smart on our part. So a lot of it has been kind of ramping him up and getting him back up to speed to where he can have a bigger role in the offense. And so we kind of had him on a pitch count, I guess you would say, early on in the year, where hey, let's get him 20 reps in this game, let's get him up to 30 reps the next game, and get him back up to speed. Because the last thing we want to do is to throw him out there and give him the entire workload, and he has 55 snaps a game, and then he's injured again, and that type of thing. So obviously we're trying to be very smart with him. And then as you know, especially Bobby, with your years of playing, and of course Mike's been around football, you've been calling games for a number of years. Sometimes the game plan, for example, when you lose a center that's as prominent and as he's a Pro Bowl caliber center like we have in our center with Erik McCoy. Sometimes the game plan kind of changes without prior warning, and so now we're asked to because of this, and now they're starting to run pressure inside and maybe games inside and things of that nature. So we're going to have to all of a sudden change the entire game plan. Let's get into more of a slide protection and some of the route concepts where we thought we might have a tight end maybe running down the middle of the field and trying to get those matchups. Now we have to, just to play smart offensive football, might have to go into more 6-man or even 7-man protection so we can slide the front. And we're not lacking for weapons outside by any stretch. With obviously number 22 and number 12 out there running around, they're having great seasons, and then you also factor in AK, who is fun to watch when he's got the ball in his hands, whether he's catching it or running it. And so oftentimes we're the ones that get caught up in that. Hey, we gotta kind of pick up the slack in certain areas just so we can try to execute the game plan. And that happens with every team at some point throughout the year, and just so happened that this past weekend was that point in the year for us.
So, yeah, I thought that was illuminating a little bit in terms of, hey, so Juwan Johnson was actually on a bit of a pitch count. And those are his words, a pitch count. Obviously, it's a snap count in reality, but you don't throw pitches in the NFL, but that's just kind of the term, the pitch count. We're going with pitch count. He's on a bit of a pitch count, and the numbers bear that out. Week 1 against the Panthers, you had 27 snaps. Week 2 against the Cowboys, you had 30 snaps. Week 3 against the Eagles, you had 33 snaps. And while that tick up doesn't necessarily seem as significant, 33 snaps in a game where you didn't run that many offensive plays compared to a game against the Cowboys when you ran a ton of offensive plays, so that percentage is a lot higher. So I think, DA was asked today whether there's any limitations on Juwan, and he said no. And I believe it, because if you're getting 33 snaps in a game where you didn't snap the ball that many times, you're pretty much a full participant. So I think, hey, hopefully more snaps can mean more opportunities to impact the field. Right now, he has 2 catches for 20-something yards. Obviously, that touchdown in week 1. But even Foster, who's been on the field a lot more, only has 5 catches for like 48 yards and a touchdown. Neither guy really made much of an impact against the Eagles. I know Foster had 1 first down where he picked up a couple yards. That was important. They designed a couple screens to try to get those guys involved. They did not work. But, at the end of the day, as long as you're asking your tight end to block 60, 70% of the time he's on the field, which I think has been the case, at least based on, the film I've watched, it's just, you're constantly asking these guys to either chip or stay in completely and block. And you're just not going to have a ton of success, or at least a ton of production out of the tight end position while that's happening. That said, I do get a little frustrated with how we talk about the tight end position and the production of the tight end position. It's the same thing. I get frustrated with how we talk about the defensive end position and production at the defensive end position, because when it comes to defensive ends, all we talk about are sacks. But half the time they can't get a sack, right? You can't get a sack when it's a run play. They can get a TFL. But a tackle for a 1-yard gain is not a TFL, but it's still a successful play, right? But there's really, obviously, so, either you're going to tackle, you're going to TFL, you're going to sack, whatever. But for whatever reason, we talk about defensive ends, and the best defensive ends every year are the ones who have 10 to 12 sacks. But that's only half the time. That's only half the plays, right? And we talk about the Eagles, and it's like, well, why did the Saints defensive line struggle? It wasn't because they didn't get to the quarterback. They didn't get to the quarterback. It was because they didn't stop the run. It was because they didn't bottle up the run, right? So, but we never talk about that. We only talk about sacks. So it's like we're only talking about half the equation. The same thing with tight ends. We talk about tight ends like they're wide receivers. They're not wide receivers. They're extra linemen, effectively. Now, some of these guys can get downfield and be a pass catcher at an elite level. Jimmy Graham, George Kittle, Travis Kelce. These guys, they can do both. Now, Jimmy Graham maybe didn't do both as well as you might have hoped. But either way, the point is, just because a guy's not catching passes does not mean he's an effective tight end. And the question is, are you doing a good enough job in the blocking game to be on the field, to extend the drives? Because these guys are going to catch passes if they're on the field. And if they're on the field, that means you're extending drives. And to extend drives, to have these 10-play, 12-play, 14-play, 15-play drives, you got to run the ball. You got to first downs. You got to stack first downs. And that's what they were unable to do against the Eagles. They were unable to extend enough drives to even get these guys opportunities to get down the field. Part of that's because of the blocking. Clancy Barone talked about that. It's like Erik McCoy goes out, and suddenly a lot of these plays, a lot of these game plan plays that you were going to run, you're no longer able to run. You're no longer able to send the tight end out up the seam because you're worried about the quarterback getting his head taken off. So you're sending them on these kind of bailout, these little check down routes that, if Derek doesn't have time to do anything, and he's doing it. That doesn't help you either. So I don't know. I just feel like if we're going to talk about the tight end, we need to talk about more, hey, are they blocking well enough? Because if you're not blocking well enough, you're not going to get on the field in the first place. And to this point, I feel like it's been up and down. I thought that the tight ends blocked really well against the Cowboys. I didn't think they blocked as well against the Eagles. That fourth down, go look at that fourth down that the Saints were unable to pick up. And, it's Foster Moreau getting blown up by Zach Bond, who then makes the tackle, right? If you're able to stay on the field there, maybe that's an opportunity for a tight end to go catch a touchdown pass. We'll never know because you didn't pick up the first down. I would like to see a few more concepts that get the ball to the tight end in space after bluffing a block, right? Kind of these leak out plays. You tried that. You tried a Y leak play against the Cowboys. It worked. It got called back for an eligible man downfield. But I do think that to an extent, that is something you could do more. And the more you can get Juwan Johnson on the field, the more likely he is to be able to have success. But either way, I thought that was interesting. Speaking of that fourth down play, Mickey Loomis was asked about his thoughts on the fourth down boldness around the NFL, and the Saints included. And this is what he had to say.
The number of teams, like Cleveland's gone for 11 fourth downs, Miami 10, 2 teams with 9, 4 teams with 7, 4 teams with 6. I mean, I guess the question is, what's different? Why is it feels like that number is enormously high for 3 weeks of football?
Well, look, I think that's a product of these analytics that teams are buying into now. And look, the numbers say that over time, it's an advantage to go for it in a lot of situations. And so, we have teams and coaches that buy into that, and probably rightfully so. I mean, it's risk versus reward. And, I think the one thing that doesn't get considered enough is, look, it's all well and good to go for it on fourth down, but do you have a play that you really love, that you feel really good about it being successful, as opposed to just going for it to go for it? And so, but I think it's a product of risk reward and the math and the value of analytics.
Where are you on the use of analytics, either during the week or for a game?
Yeah, look, we have some guys that do a great job in that area, and I look at it, and I think most teams look at it this way. It's a tool in the toolbox, and it's going to help you make decisions as opposed to making the decisions for you. And I think that's the way that most of the coaches in our league look at it. Is, look, they want the information. Ultimately, it's their decision, and sometimes you go with that. Sometimes you go with your gut.
So yeah, I think he's right there. I think it is about the analytics and just how confident teams are in turning to them and turning their decision making over to that entirely. And it's funny because last year talked about Dan Gamble and always constantly going forward on fourth down. You saw it in the playoffs, and everyone's excited about it until it doesn't work. And that's my issue. Is either you are on board or you're off board. You cannot go at it and say, hey, well, it worked, so I like it. But the first time it doesn't work, I'm out. No, you can't do it that way. Either you're in or you are out. There's no halfway in terms of we're doing this because the math says it's the right call. Now, at the end of the day, it's like you're going to use your gut. You're going to do whatever. But that's not going away. Teams are not going to suddenly get less aggressive on fourth down just because it doesn't work a few times. So that's something. That's definitely something to keep in mind. One other note before we go: Christian Boyd was fined. I think it was $5,000. It's a lower fine than normal because he's a rookie and he's on a rookie pay scale and it's his first offense. But he was fined for that hit on Devontae Smith. I still don't think, there's a lot of discourse going around that Christian Boyd is a dirty player and Peyton Turner is a dirty player. I think that the refs should get some criticism for this, because if they blow a whistle, Christian Boyd's not laying that hit. Now you're still going to get fined for that hit on Devontae Smith because it was a tough hit, but it is what it is. The Peyton Turner thing is ridiculous. Ridiculous. Peyton Turner is not the type of guy who's going to spit on a injured player on the ground. Now, I understand why it looked like that. But man, y'all are like, people are way too willing to jump to assumptions. So first, he speared him on the ground. No, he dove for a ball on the ground. If you go back and watch the replay, the ball's kicking around and he's trying to get it because that's what you do. You go get the ball. Now, did he need to jump over Devontae Smith to get it? I don't know, but he didn't hit him or anything. It was just the ball was there. He was trying to recover it because that's his job, right? Then he gets up and spits on the ground. And on the broadcast, you don't have a scale, you don't have depth perception there. So you see Devontae in the background, Peyton Turner in the foreground. He spits on the ground. Oh my God, he spit on him. I mean, it's funny because I looked at it and I was like, why is everyone so up in arms about this? And I realized I think part of the issue is the average person maybe isn't aware of how frequently these guys are spitting on the field. And it's kind of gross, but that's just the reality. Now, I don't know if you've ever played. If you've never played on one of these turf fields, and I know a lot of people have, and you're like, of course, but if you've never played, we talk about, if you watch a replay, you see the pellets fly up, right? Like that's how you can tell they dragged their feet, is the pellets fly up. Well, that happens too when you're diving on the ground. And so you're Peyton Turner, and then this is just me making an assumption here. You're Peyton Turner. You dive on the ground. Those pellets get everywhere. What happens if you get a bunch of rubber pellets in your mouth? What are you going to do? What's your first reaction? You're going to swallow them? No, you're going to spit them out. And I have a feeling that's what happened there. And I think I've always assumed that's why these guys are spitting all the time. Anytime you get up from the field and you have rubber pellets in your mouth, you're going to spit them out, and there's nowhere else to spit them, so you spit them on the field. But stupid. People are saying fine them. People are saying suspend them for 2 years, and just I don't know. Like, it was a tough hit. You feel bad for Devontae Smith. Hopefully, he's not out for too long. Again, that's why the refs are supposed to blow the whistle, and that is what it is. But either way, that's the end of this podcast. Thanks everyone for hanging out. Again, I'm Jeff Nowak. This is Inside Black and Gold. We'll be coming at you later in the week with our official Week 4 preview episode. We're going to try to get someone from the Falcons land on here. I don't know who that's going to be. We're still efforting a guest. I feel confident we'll be able to get somebody. I do. I have a good feeling about it. But until then, who dat? Thanks everyone for hanging out. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do that. Leave a rating, leave a review on Apple Podcasts. Hit me up on Twitter at Jeff_Nowak. Follow the latest news and notes and analysis over at WWL.com of the latest insight from Bobby Hebert, Deuce McAllister, all that good stuff. You can even catch up on these interviews from Mickey Loomis, Clancy Barone, all that good stuff at WWL.com. But who dat? Go Saints. BZL. Peace.